Drag down the 7 bodies and make them mortal. Then strike them down, showing no mercy. Once they lie cold and dead, raise them up from their tombs, and restore them blooming and rosy onto the heavens. Selah. Blessings and salutations, mortals. I am your host Simeon, welcoming you back to what some people call the Library of Gnosis. The Hermetic initiatory tradition uses the number 7 to describe the incarnation of consciousness in matter through 7 alchemical operations. These operations aim to redeem 7 archetypal pairs of opposites through the exercise of virtue and art to achieve 7 levels of divine gifts. The 7 operations, then, also become the epitome of the 7 biblical days of creation. Through its gradations, 7 levels of 7 degrees emerge through which the adept can complete the divine work. The 7 levels concern 1. Laboratory alchemy. 2. The creation of the world. 3. The spiritual transformation of the material world. 4. The creation of humanity. 5. The transformation of a mortal being into an immortal being. 6. The life of Christ. And 7. The revelation of the whole being of divinity. Within each level, development takes place through the 7 operations of creation. Alchemy, the divine work. The celestial spheres, or celestial orbs, were the fundamental entities of the cosmological models developed by Plato, Eudoxus, Aristotle, Ptolemy, Copernicus, and others. In these celestial models, the apparent motions of the fixed stars and planets are accounted for by treating them as embedded in rotating spheres made of an ethereal, transparent fifth element, quintessence, like gems set in orbs. Since it was believed that the fixed stars did not change their positions relative to one another, it was argued that they must be on the surface of a single starry sphere. In modern thought, the orbits of the planets are viewed as the paths of those planets through mostly empty space. Ancient and medieval thinkers, however, considered the celestial orbs to be thick spheres of rarefied matter nested one within the other, each one in complete contact with the sphere above it and the sphere below. When scholars applied Ptolemy's epicycles, they presumed that each planetary sphere was exactly thick enough to accommodate them. By combining this nested sphere model with astronomical observations, scholars calculated what became generally accepted values at the time for the distances to the Sun, about 6.4 million kilometers, to the other planets and to the edge of the universe, about 117 million kilometers. Albert van Helden has suggested that from about 1250 until the 17th century, virtually all educated Europeans were familiar with the Ptolemaic model of nesting spheres and the cosmic dimensions derived from it. Even following the adoption of Copernicus' heliocentric model of the universe, new versions of the celestial sphere model were introduced. Mainstream belief in the theory of celestial spheres did not survive the scientific revolution. In the early 1600s, Kepler continued to discuss celestial spheres, although he did not consider that the planets were carried by the spheres. but held that they moved in elliptical paths described by Kepler's law of planetary motion. In the late 1600s, Greek and medieval theories concerning the motion of terrestrial and celestial objects were replaced by Newton's law of universal gravitation and Newtonian mechanics, which explains how Kepler's laws arise from the gravitational attraction between bodies. In Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, each dwarf represents a planetary force that has been dragged down into the earthly realm, made to labor in the mines of the material world, the unconscious, the body, or the physical realm. Their work, mining precious metals, mirrors the alchemical process of refining base matter into spiritual gold. This plate from the alchemical treatise Splendor Solis, titled Mining the Ore, perfectly depicts this process. Here is one suggestion of how you might connect each dwarf with its corresponding planetary archetype. Although, feel free to let me know how to improve it. The dwarf dog represents the sun, the virtue of humility and the sin of pride. He is the leader, authoritative and wise. The dwarf happy represents the moon, the virtue of temperance and the sin of gluttony. He enjoys life pleasures and is indulgent. The dwarf Sneezy represents the planet Mercury, the virtue of kindness and the sin of envy. He is sensitive and reactive, which fits envy's irrational nature. The dwarf Bashful represents the planet Venus, the virtue of chastity and the sin of lust. He is shy but connected to love and attraction. The dwarf Grumpy represents the planet Mars, the virtue of patience and the sin of wrath. He is short-tempered, obviously. The dwarf Dopey represents the planet Jupiter, the virtue of charity and the sin of greed. He is a bit clueless, yet tied to Jupiter's expansiveness. The dwarf Sleepy represents the planet Saturn, the virtue of diligence and the sin of sloth. He lacks commitment, is slow-moving and sleepy. The dwarves live in the wilderness, estranged from a royal court or celestial order. This represents the planets fallen from their divine stations. Much like the ancient idea of divine beings choosing to experience the human condition. They toil in the mines, mirroring the planet's struggle as they manifest through the limitations of the material world, the natal chart's houses. Snow White herself represents the prima materia, the alchemical substance that undergoes transformation. One name used for the prima materia is actually the white smoke and boiling milk. She is the soul or divine spark, initially pure but entrapped in a state of unconsciousness. The poison apple, a dual symbol of death and wisdom, sends her into a deep sleep, a state of suspended animation, mirroring the nigredo, or blackening in alchemy. My opening statement, strike them down, then raise them up again, parallels Snow White's journey. The dwarves, as planetary forces, are powerless to revive her. They mourn, symbolizing the planetary energies at their lowest, trapped in sorrow. Only through an external force, the Prince, a solar or divine Christ-like figure, does resurrection occur. This moment signifies the restoration of cosmic order. Snow White's ascension to queenship with the Prince represents the final stage of alchemical transmutation, rubedo or reddening. The dwarves, having played their role, seem to fade into the background, their task complete. They have guided the soul through material suffering, witnessed its death, and now allow it to return to the celestial spheres. The story follows the same rhythm: descent into matter, death, and re-ascension. The Seven Dwarfs symbolize the fallen planets, laboring in the mines of existence, ultimately witnessing the soul's triumph over mortality. This is the great work of alchemy, spiritualizing the material, redeeming the fallen, and returning them to divine unity. In the Hermetic tradition, the initially dark planets must be transformed with the alchemical fire to light up like the seven seals in the Book of Revelation. Otherwise, the seven planetary forces control the darkened and not yet enlightened human, making her destitute. The planetary spheres are purified and lit up by alchemical practices such as active imagination, magical invocation, alchemical elixirs and oils. Then, when the unenlightened consciousness of the dark planets lights up, we can orbit them towards the sun at the center of our being, lighting up the seal of the heart. As Gitchel's model in chapter 28 shows, to create the apocalypse of the heart, the dark misty veils of illusion must be lifted from our seals, so that a new human can be born. For each seal to be broken, the initiate must work with the fears and limitations that lie as a membrane over each of the seven seals. The dark veils of illusion prevent us from possessing our full power and acting in accordance with divine providence. Alchemy, the divine work. And so, dear seekers, as we toil within the mines of this material world, let us remember the great work, the alchemical ascent, the rebirth from the poisoned apple of ignorance, and the cosmic dance of celestial forces through 7 sacred steps. Don't let the entire staircase overwhelm you. Just focus on that first step. If you made it this far in the broadcast, then write. If the dwarves can mine the depths, we can surely reach the heights. So I know you did. If you enjoyed this broadcast and want to get access to early releases of my videos, and the scripts, which include my sources, then feel free to check out my Patreon or become a member on YouTube. I would like to thank you all for watching. Until we meet again, may your planetary forces align, your seals break, and your heart be the sun. And I will see you, yes, specifically you listening, in the next broadcast. Godspeed, mortals!